Before WrestleFest lit up the arcades with its flashy lights, larger-than-life wrestlers, and unforgettable action, there was another game that started it all. A game that laid the foundation. A game that walked into the ring first, cleared the crowd, and raised the bar to a high level for wrestling games everywhere. That game was WWF Superstars. In 1989, when WWF Superstars hit arcades, it felt like magic. For the first time ever, players could control real-life WWF legends in a tag team match right on the arcade machine. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, the Big Boss Man, etc., etc., they were all there, slamming their way across the screen. The crowds at the arcades were hooked, and just couldn't get enough. This was wrestling like we had never seen before, fast, colorful, and full of personality. But wrestling, just like gaming, never stands still. It's always moving forward. New rivalries, new moves, and bigger matches. And the same goes for wrestling games. Now, don't get me wrong, WWF Superstars was great. A milestone, no doubt about it. But by the early 90s, it was starting to show its age, just a little bit. Great as the game was, it was still kind of basic in some ways, and the matches were kind of short, and the graphics, well, as beautiful as they were at the time, they still had room to improve. And then in 1991, there was a game changer. And this time, a new challenger entered the arcade ring. And that game was WWF WrestleFest. It just didn't show up, it exploded onto the scene. Everything about it was louder, faster, and more intense. It took what Superstars started and cranked up the volume to 11. One of the major improvements were, now you had a full Royal Rumble mode, more detailed graphics, and finishers that looked just like the ones on TV. And the characters weren't just sprites on a screen, they came to life. And it was clear from the start, this was a new era in WWF arcade wrestling games. So let's say Superstars was the beginning, the one that started the fire, but WrestleFest, that, my friends, was the main event. This is the story of WWF WrestleFest, the arcade. Now, before WWF WrestleFest ever lit up an arcade screen, the team behind it, Technos Japan, was already a big name in video games. They weren't just developers, they were pioneers. This was a company that helped shape how action games looked and felt in the late 80s and early 90s. When you walked into an arcade and heard the sounds of punches, kicks, and cheers from the crowd, chances are you were hearing a Technos Japan game. And they had a string of games and arcade hits under their belt. Obviously, we had Double Dragon in 1987, and this was a side-scroll beat-em-up where two brothers fought through waves of enemies to rescue a kidnapped girl. And it helped invent the idea of co-op brawling. And often at times, Double Dragon has a special place in my heart. It was often the grandfather of beat-em-up games. And the game was so popular at the time. I mean, Double Dragon was special. It had cartoons, toys, and a movie. Yeah. Also, there were lesser known but important titles like Renegade, which is one of the first games to use belt scrolling combat. What belt scrolling is, it means players could move not just left and right, but also up and down on a screen like a real fight. And it actually laid the groundwork for many fighting games that came after it. And then they were also doing well on the NES side, with one of my all-time favorites, River City Ransom. We definitely gotta do a video on that one at a later date, but River City Ransom, just know, chef's kiss on that game for the NES. And River City Ransom was a cult classic. It blended action and comedy. And it wasn't just about punching and kicking the bad guys, it had shops, food to buy, RPG style upgrades. Players could actually level up their character, learn new moves, and explore a city full of weird but interesting characters. In my mind, it was way ahead of its time, and is still highly cherished and loved by fans to this day. And with those games, Technos showed they knew how to make action fun, fast, and full of personality. So when they set their sights on professional wrestling, it made perfect sense. So in 1989, they stepped into the squared circle with WWF Superstars, their first wrestling game based on the World Wrestling Federation. At the time, wrestling was in a wrestling boom, the golden age of wrestling. Macho Man, the Hulkster, Ultimate Warrior were all household names by that time. When WrestleMania was selling out in arenas, kids were buying action figures, t-shirts, lunchboxes, you name it. And WWF Superstars had some heart. It wasn't just a quick cash-in, it captured the flashy energy of wrestlers' golden age. Bright colors, big characters, and over-the-top moves made it a hit in arcades around the world. Players could pick real WWF wrestlers and compete for the championship belts. For many fans, it was the first time they could actually play as their wrestling heroes in a fast-paced coin-operated game. However, that was just the beginning. Technos was nowhere near done with innovations. By 1991, wrestling had gotten even bigger. The WWF was on fire with larger-than-life superstars, sold-out arenas, and TV ratings that kept climbing. Wrestling was getting louder, wilder, and even more exciting. And Technos wanted to bring that same feeling into the arcades like never before. That's when they went back to the drawing board. They weren't just planning a sequel, they were planning a spectacle. and the result was WWF WrestleFest. Now, this wasn't just a small update to Superstars. You know how you see in some arcade games where they just kind of do a little bit more? This was a total makeover from the ground up. WrestleFest was built from the ground up to be bigger, bolder, and better in every way. The graphics were more detailed, the animations were smoother, and the roster was packed with even more top wrestling names. Also, Technos added 2 full game modes, a Saturday night's main event tag team tournament, and the massive Royal Rumble, where players could fight it out in a 10-man battle royale. And the speakers, the sound was louder, the action was crazier, and the wrestlers looked almost like cartoons come to life. The huge bodies, expressive faces, and signature moves fans would instantly recognize. From the roar of the crowd, the wrestlers walking down to the apron, the outside action where you could actually hit your opponent in the head with a set of steel stairs, WrestleFest captured the drama of pro wrestling like never before. It just hadn't been seen at the time. And as for kids growing up in the early 90s, stepping up to a WrestleFest arcade machine kind of felt like stepping in the WWF ring itself. Technos Japan had done it again. They didn't just make a sequel, they made history. So let's talk about the gameplay in WWF WrestleFest that set this game apart. Now, I remember first seeing this game back in the day at the mall at Aladdin's Castle. I don't know if you know what that is, but it was an arcade chain back in the day when they gave you little like tokens that look like little gold pieces. But anyway, you can tell a good arcade from a amateur arcade, because usually they'd have like the games likewise. So if you had racing games, you had racing games, you had wrestling games, you had wrestling games, sports games, and so forth. So what was so cool, what blew me away with WrestleFest was the first time I saw it, they had WWF Superstars machine, right? And then I remember, because you always check your local arcade to see if they got any new games. So when I went in there, I saw WrestleFest, and I was just blown away by a side-by-side comparison. Because when you see a sequel in an arcade, back in the day, it was a big deal. It was like, whoa, because it usually hits you out of nowhere. You had magazines back then and stuff, but generally they tend more towards consoles and not so much arcades. So when you saw a new arcade game, unless it was a big takeoff like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or something like that, but WrestleFest was just like larger than life when I first saw it, and I actually got goosebumps. It was on a 25-inch CRT, brand new machine, big loud speakers, and it was a spectacle to see. I mean, it was amazing. So yeah, sequels can often in an arcade back in the day be a big deal, especially if they're unexpected and come out of nowhere. I didn't think they could improve on Superstars like they did, but definitely seeing them side by side, you could definitely night and day difference. So WWF WrestleFest is a 2D arcade wrestling game made for 1 to 4 players. That means you could actually play by yourself or with 3 of your friends or complete strangers, either as teammates or opponents. And the controls were super easy to understand. 1 button to punch and 1 button to kick. And you did the regular grapple, but once you grapple with your opponent, that's when the game comes to life. Each match is packed with high impact wrestling moves that keep the action fast and exciting. You can slam your opponent with a body slam, flip them over with a suplex, or run them with a crushing clothesline. You can even climb the turnbuckles like the old game, leap off the top rope with a dramatic dive off the top rope. And this game's not about throwing punches, there's a strategy too. In tag mode, you and your partner can take turns in the ring. And it even shows damage. If you start getting tired or hurt, your character will start to slow down and you can tag out and let your partner take over. And that's key to the game. Timing your tags and helping your partner when they're in trouble is a big part of winning. Now, one of the coolest parts of WrestleFest is how it includes submission moves and signature finish moves, just like in real professional wrestling. And submission holds in this game are key. A lot of people didn't even know you could do them. But what you're supposed to do when you knock down your opponent, you come down to their lower half of their body, their legs, and hit both buttons at the same time. And then you perform a submission move. And I've seen tons of people play the game all the way to the end and not use one submission move. Now, one of the key factors with that is once you beat up your opponent bad enough, they'll start walking back to their corner. If you can get them down with the submission move, they'll usually throw you off, but that will activate both characters to come inside the ring. And the reason you want that is because now if they're both in there, you got a couple more chances to grapple your opponent and actually pin them or submit them before they tag their partner. So that's just a small tip I'm going to give you guys about strategies with WWF WrestleFest, but I'm sure you guys already knew that. So submission holds are also special in the regard they don't slam your opponent, but they wear them down slowly. And the most common ones in the games were the Boston Crab, where you flip your opponent on their stomach and pull back on their legs, or a figure 4 leg lock. And if your opponent is weak enough and don't escape, they might even tap out, giving you the win. So submissions add a different kind of strategy at that time in a wrestling game. Instead of just going for a pin, you could try to slowly break your opponent's will. And then there are the signature moves, the big, crowd-popping attacks that match each wrestler's real-life personality. And this time, in my opinion, I think they did it a little bit better than Superstars. For example, this time you get the whole animation of Hulk Hogan's leg drop, a move that flattens his opponents with a giant leg slam to the chest. The Ultimate Warrior might use his high-speed gorilla press slam, and he had it in the old one, but this time it looks a little bit better. And all the wrestlers had them. Their special moves were flashy, powerful, and feel incredibly satisfying to pull off. Landing one of these can turn a tide in a match, or even end it on the spot, depending if you have a submission or a pinfall. And I'll say again, like I said with WWF Superstars, I wish they would include it. You still can't do the taunt like the computer can. I mean, that to me was again a missed opportunity that they didn't put in the original WWF Superstars. You can't taunt when you want to. If you can do it, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, I think only the computer can taunt when they want to. So the whole game feels heavy and powerful. Every hit, every slam, every crash into the mat makes a huge impact. And the wrestlers move with a kind of exaggerated weight that makes them feel like you're controlling real giants. I mean, they are a little bulky, but it works for them. Here's the thing, WrestleFest isn't about being realistic, and it's not a sports simulator. Instead, it's like a living, breathing cartoon version of pro wrestling. Bright colors, wild animations, and over-the-top action, and it works perfectly. Some people do say the wrestlers look kind of fat at times, but I feel like it works for them. It makes them larger than life, especially on that CRT screen back in the day with those big sprites. So let's talk about the game modes that brought the game to life. WWF WrestleFest didn't just deliver fun gameplay, it gave players 2 thrilling game modes that offered 2 totally different kinds of wrestling experiences. First up, you had Saturday night's main event. And in this mode, you pick your favorite wrestling duo and enter the tag team tournament. Each round, you face off against different pairs of WWF legends. The matches get tougher the further you go into the game, with each opponent putting up more of a fight. And your final challenge, a showdown with the unstoppable Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal, in one of the most intense boss fights in arcade wrestling history. Now to win, you need to start tagging, perfect timing, and like I said, throwing those submission moves. And you gotta know when to tag out, when to go for a finisher, and when to risk staying in the ring. Next up, we got the Royal Rumble, and this was cool because Royal Rumble was still kind of new at the time. It had a couple of years under its belt, but it was still kind of a new thing. And this mode is pure chaos. They did it right. It's a 6-man, no-holds-barred brawl where every wrestler is out for themselves. No partners, no tagging, just flying bodies everywhere. Wrestlers get eliminated by being thrown off the ring, and as soon as one leaves, a new one jumps in. And it's so cool how they do that. When the wrestler comes in, it spins around, they'll show them, just like on TV back at the time, the wrestler would do his little cameo in that little box, and then he'd turn around and run towards the ring. And that was like enough to give you goosebumps. It was just cool how they incorporate that into the game. So basically, you got to stay sharp the whole time. Watch your back, counter every attack, and look for perfect moments to toss someone over the ropes. And if you last long enough, you'll be one of the final survivors. But to win, you have to be the last man standing. And one of the things that were real frustrating about that game that was fun was you could get all the way to the end, because you'd probably spend about 50 cents. If you were really good, maybe 50 cents to beat the Royal Rumble mode. But you could pack that thing full of quarters, and then something random could happen in the game, which is frustrating at the time because you were spending real money. They could just do something simple as body slam you over the ropes. I know I've had that happen to me a couple of times, and it's so frustrating because the game's pretty much over as fast as it started, or somebody can Irish whip you and then the computer flips you out and you're done. So you have to be careful with the Royal Rumble mode because once you're out, it's no continuing, it's game over. You know, with the tag Saturday night main event, you could actually be low on life, put another quarter in, and then, you know, kick out of the pin or whatever. But Royal Rumble mode was kind of cutthroat. It just, you're out, that's it, game over. So the Royal Rumble mode captured the thrill and unpredictability of the real WWF better than any game before it at the time. It was fast, loud, and every second felt like something crazy could happen. Okay, so let's talk about the roster. So when you played the WWF WrestleFest Arcade machine back in the day and tried to pick your character, you weren't picking characters, you were actually picking legends. So let's dive in. First up, we got Hulk Hogan. Known as the Immortal One, Hulk Hogan was the biggest name in wrestling at the time, with his trademark yellow gear, mustache, and bandana. Hogan was all about saying your prayers, eating the vitamins, you know, all that stuff. And in the game, he was extremely powerful, flexed his muscles, and delivered leg drops just like in real life. Now, I've said this before, Hogan at the time was like, you know, larger than life. It was going towards WrestleMania. It was leading up to that. And again, whatever you think of Hogan nowadays, I mean, it is what it is. But back then, he was still the guy, the living legend icon. And everybody loved Hulk Hogan. He was awesome at the time. So yeah, basically the face of this game. Kind of. I mean, there are some other superstars in this one that had their own arcs going, but probably Hogan is the most recognizable. Next up, we got Ultimate Warrior, and the Warrior exploded into the ring with the wild face paint again and wilder energy. In WrestleFest, they sped him up a little bit as opposed to WWF Superstars. He had his running clotheslines, powerful body slams, the gorilla press, and they actually gave him a a running splash dive for a pin move. So I thought that was pretty cool. They did change him up and give him some more stuff. Now in this version, the Ultimate Warrior, he's a lot better than the WWF Superstars version because he had the gorilla press in both versions, but this time they gave him a lot more of his traditional moves. He had the clothesline, he had the splash when he'd go off the ring and just jump and do a splash. He didn't have that in the old one. As far as a wrestler at the time, at this time I feel like the Warrior was still iconic, and he's always gonna be iconic. It's Ultimate Warrior, but I feel like you weren't hearing so much about. I think his gimmick had kind of played out at the time, so you weren't really seeing him like you did back in the early 90s when he first showed up, late 80s, early 90s when he first showed up. But he was still kind of around. But yeah, I guess people got over the whole, shaking the ropes and the bad promos he had. Sorry, Warrior fans, but yeah, that's kind of where we were at that time. Next up, we had Jake the Snake Roberts, and he was calm, cold, and creepy. I mean, he was just kind of weird. Jake was Jake was like an anti-hero in some ways, and he didn't need flashy moves. He used mind games. In the game, Jake is all about sneaky grapples, smooth movements, and he also has a DDT. I like how he spun his hand around and then did his DDT. Players who like strategy over brute strength often chose Jake the Snake. As far as Jake the Snake, in my opinion, as a wrestler, I like Jake. He looked like the guy next door, like somebody you'd see it, somebody that, somebody you knew, like your old uncle or, just something like that. I mean, his wrestling style wasn't super technical, but it was just cool with his whole gimmick with Damien the Snake. And so he had some really good rivals. I think the best one for me was his rivalry with the Undertaker, or in Earthquake as well, when Earthquake supposedly crushed Damien. I mean, it was just a good times. He was just one of those characters that didn't have to cut no good promos, none. He was just entertaining to watch. So yes, I definitely enjoyed Jake the Snake Roberts. And next up, we have Mr. Perfect. Wearing his iconic singlet and smug smile, Mr. Perfect brought technical skill and confidence to the ring. I mean, he moved with grace and control, delivering perfect drop kicks and suplexes. And everything Perfect did looked smooth, like a pro who had everything under control. So definitely a strong character in this game. Now, honestly, on this particular game, Mr. Perfect is my favorite. As far as the wrestling world goes, I love Mr. Perfect. I mean, what I liked about him was when he first showed up in WWF, he had the perfect record, and I remember his promos were just over the top. I like the one where he had the football, he threw it and he ran across, which is bogus in my nowadays standards, but he threw the football, ran all the way across the field, ran and caught it. He's like, oh, that's perfect. Everything he did, he had the basketball ones, he had the towel. He just had, Mr. Perfect, in my opinion, was everything a wrestler should be. He was muscular, he had charisma, he was great showmanship, he had that towel, he had the gummy chew, the attitude, the swag. I mean, Mr. Perfect was just an awesome WWF, and he actually had really good technical wrestling. So I mean, he's a second generation wrestler as well, so he was just awesome. Mr. Perfect was the guy. So yeah, definitely pick Mr. Perfect if you play this game. All right, next up we got Sergeant Slaughter, and I got a lot to say about Sergeant Slaughter. So now this military powerhouse was slow but strong and had that iconic drill sergeant attire. He used big punches and slams that looked like they could shake the ring, and his character showed his toughness and, I don't know about honor, but he was some kind of soldier, never backing down from a fight. Now, I got a little bit to say about Sergeant Slaughter. I think in the wrestling world, cool dude. I like when he became the commissioner in later years in the WWF, but if we're talking about the wrestling portion of Sergeant Slaughter, I really don't know what to make of it. I mean, he had a set of moves, because I think about Sergeant Slaughter, and I think I got a history with him. I think about the G.I. Joe series with the G.I. Joe crossover when they had G.I. Joe the movie, how he was like untouchable and nothing can hurt him, and he was like invincible. And I gotta call it out. In the cartoon, he was jacked and everything. When you wrestle, the wrestler version, the real life version of him, he wasn't, I'm just gonna say, being kind, he wasn't as jacked as he was. The body proportion was definitely different. However, that didn't take away from the character. And then I think his sprite, what bothers me the most, and it's classic and it's got charm, but his underbite, when he moves around the ring in this game, man, my man just has like he's just chewing on, I don't know what he's chewing on, some leather or something. There's something in his mouth that just like, man, like the Godfather. My man just has this big, ridiculous chin. But over the years, I mean, with the bald head and everything, it works for him. Over the years, it's become iconic, but whenever you see that, it's always like that chin just, the first thing that jumps out and grabs you. Overall, in this game, I feel like he had a pretty good moveset. He had his finisher, and it just looks cool how he puts his hand up and just kind of puts it into the side of your head. It's just a very cool character. I was glad to see Sergeant Slaughter in this game. And next up, we got Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, always wearing that suit and the smug grin. DiBiase fought dirty like he does in every game. but he did it with style. He was flashy, cocky, and always full of tricks, highly technical, and unforgettable. Now, one thing I want to say is a viewer of the WWF Superstars video did correct me on this, and shout outs to him for that, or her. Yeah, I was talking about the money, sticking the $100 bill in your opponent's mouth, and while I still feel like stuffing money in somebody's mouth kind of dirty, but at the same time, he did call out the fact that Virgil, because Virgil would always be with Ted DiBiase counting the money, you know how he does, and he would get the money from Virgil. So while the money in the mouth is still questionable, at least it came out of somebody's hands as opposed to DiBiase pulling it out of his trunks. So, okay, we know where the money comes from. Still, I don't know how I feel about that. But overall, as far as DiBiase as a wrestler, he's always been highly technical, good showman, and iconic laugh and everything. And his intro was also nice. So shouts out to him. Good to see him back in this game. Next up, we got the Big Boss Man, and he kind of looks the same as he did in WWF Superstars, just a lot better. And he's still rocking that correctional officer suit, brought with law enforcement and punishment to the ring. I mean, he was big, loud, and dangerous. In the game, he had heavy punches, powerful slams, and still that same no-nonsense attitude. Now, you couldn't use his baton or anything like that, but the fact that he had it. Now, as far as Boss Man goes, again, like I say, a good character, good heel character. I do like the later incarnations when you wear the all-black fatigues, more towards the Attitude Era. He's been a true character to survive the best of times. I still love the best version of him is the Twin Towers version with Akeem, the African Dream, and I'm a shout out to Akeem again, you know, with his whole thing, the whole dance he had. Yeah, so good times with the Boss Man. But he was the Boss Man. One thing I'll give him, he was very consistent, and when he did his moves and whatnot, they looked he sold them. They looked really good when he did it. It looked like it seriously hurt. I remember he had his big rivalry with Nails. That was one like an inmate or whatever. So I remember around that time frame. So Boss Man was still pretty popular around this time in the 90s. Next up, we got Earthquake. Massive and unstoppable, Earthquake was a human wrecking ball. He moved slow but could crush opponents with a body slash. And in the game, when Earthquake did his finisher, he jumped and slammed down, and the entire screen would shake as he's jumping around the ring, just like his name promised. Now, Earthquake, he was one of those guys that he had a kind of a window in WWF at the time, big wrestlers, and but he sold it well. It did look pretty painful. I remember seeing as a kid when he do his splash and land on the opponent's chest. It looked like, man, and I didn't think that would have to hurt anyway. That's a big dude landing, even if he's just sitting on your chest. That's a big dude dropping down like that. But for his size, he was pretty quick. So I feel like he was a good gimmick character. Earthquake, and they had the I think it was Earthquake, Typhoon. They had the tag team. So yeah, he had a good little stint in there as far as, I think he did better in tag teams, but still a memorable character. And then next tag teams, we had Demolition, Smash, and Crush. Now these mass monsters were tag machines, dressed in black and leather face paint. Demolition fought like tanks. They were made for teamwork in tag matches, and they would cut off the ring, double team, and dominate their opponents. Players who like working with a partner love picking this duo. Now Demolition was weird because you had 3 of them actually, but only 2 made appearances in the game. You had X, Smash, and Crush. And I think in this game it's Crush, and Crush went on to have his own career. You know, he took the face paint off, and he crushed the pineapples and stuff. I don't know. I don't feel like it really. I won't say it didn't work, but he kind of faded out, kind of. But I think he kind of went on to the other 2 wrestlers. I can't really comment on them because only thing I know them for is Demolition. I'm sure they had other gimmicks at one time in wrestling, but that's what I know them from. And what made it kind of cool was at the time they were a hot tag team duo. So you had it was a kind of a crossover in a sense for them to fight Legion of Doom, because I think honestly I'm old school. Legion of Doom, yes. But I think more Road Warriors when I see these guys, more of the NWA era and stuff like that. But that's a different story for a different time. But Legion of Doom, I'll go with that. So it was kind of a crossover because at the time you weren't getting that where wrestlers would, on a main stage, major wrestlers would, crossover. You were starting to go there, but that wouldn't come around. I'd say the first people to really do that is WCW and WWF, when a lot of WWF wrestlers went over to WCW. But again, getting off topic, but that's wrestling was it's so much crap going on in wrestling. You could sit here and talk about wrestling forever. But anyway, so yeah, it was good to see them in this game. They had some pretty cool moves. If you picked them, you had to pick them together. So you couldn't pick them separately. So yeah, if you picked one, you had to pick the other. So that was kind of one of the weird things. And lastly, we got the Legion of Doom, also known as Hawk and Animal. And they were pure power and intimidation in this game. I mean, beating them, you're going to spend about $1, $1.50, maybe even $2 easy. And there's no shame in that. These guys were just hard. And they had the iconic shoulder pads with the spikes, the face paint, and they just basically came in here to dominate. They hit harder, moved faster, and worked better together than any other characters in the game. Beating them basically felt like climbing a mountain. So we'll talk about them real quick. Legion of Doom, LOD. I know them better, for me, as Road Warriors from the old NWA days, but I remember that's where I first saw them. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. But Legion of Doom, it's still cool to see them cross over into this game with WWF Superstars and see how good they did make an impact in WWF. They had a successful career in both, and then they went solo for a little bit. But it was just, as far as tag teams go back in the day, tag teams like that were like, super iconic. I mean, you had other ones like Killer Bees, Heart Foundation. So you had a lot of iconic ones, but the biggest and strongest were basically known to be these guys. And you had the Powers of Pain, if you remember those. If if you're an old head like me, you remember like wrestlers like that. But the most iconic ones to me was basically the Legion of Doom, and it was really good to see them in this game. I mean, and obviously, like I said earlier, if you get to these guys, there's no shame if you spend about $2 trying to beat these dudes, because they're tough. And one thing that sucks, unfortunately, you can't pick these guys. I mean, there's a code where you can kind of put it in and kind of halfway pick the character, but there's no official way to play as the Legion of Doom, which I thought was a bummer. But yeah, you can't pick those characters, but they're broken anyway if you could. So now we got the characters out the way. Let's talk about what made WrestleFest special. Now, what made it special, it wasn't just who was in it, but how they were in it. Every wrestler looked, moved, and acted like their real life self. The game used some of the most advanced animations of its time. Wrestlers taunted, winced, flexed, and even celebrated in their own way. And all the small details brought this game to life, like how they stood up from the mat or climbed the ropes, their iconic intros where they walked down to the apron. I mean, they captured the golden age of wrestling. Now let's talk about the presentation. So when you first lay eyes on WWF WrestleFest, it doesn't just look like a wrestling game. I mean, obviously it is, but it feels like you stepped into like a living, breathing, like almost comic book. The visuals, they just leap off the screen, bright, bold colors, and huge, exaggerated character sprites. And each character is drawn with thick, dark outlines that make them stand out like superheroes in the old school graphic novel as opposed to their wrestling counterparts. Whether it's Hulk Hogan flexing his muscles, or even a smaller wrestler like Ted DiBiase still looks jacked in this game. So it brings all the movements and make them look larger than life. And then the action inside the ring is full of small but exciting details. For example, when you suplex somebody hard enough, the ring ropes actually bounce, reacting to the impact. Crowd members jump up in the background, and so forth. And each wrestler has their own health bar, and depending on what move you get, it depletes a little bit of your life bar. So it's not just helpful to gauge yourself during the match, it adds tension. Because trust me, you don't want to put a quarter in. You can feel the danger as your health drops down, and you don't want to put another quarter in. You got the choice to put the quarter in and save yourself, or you can try to tough it out, because you do get a little bit of health back. Well, actually, they're pretty generous with the health you get back, and you can survive another match. So that's a choice you got to make. But the presentation isn't all you see, it's also about what you hear, and WrestleFest sounds just as good as it looks. The entrance music blasts through the speakers when each wrestler walks to the ring. And this music is hype, probably one of the best intros in an arcade game that I can remember. And the sound effects are on point. Every punch, kick, bite slam, and pile driver comes with a loud crunching noise and a loud thud. And it accents every move, making it look that much more powerful and painful. And of course, one of the best parts is, we can't forget the voice of the announcer, one of the most memorable parts of WrestleFest sound design, the voiceover for Michelle McGurk. We all know who she is. Now, she might not be known wide by fans, but her energetic and clear vocal work helped shape the identity of the game. Now, who is this lady we're talking about? She had a suit, shiny suit all the time, had the blonde hair and the microphone, and during main events, usually she would announce the wrestlers as they came into the ring. Very iconic. She stayed around probably between the late 80s to maybe the mid 90s. Michelle, and like I say, for her to make an appearance in this game and actually have that announcement, that was one of the hypest parts of the game, when wrestlers would come down and she'd announce all the wrestlers who were getting into the ring. So yeah, let's go ahead and check that segment out real quick. Oof, yeah, that was just always a spectacle, especially if you saw it for the first time back in 1991. So let's take a quick comparison of WWF Superstars as opposed to the successor WWF WrestleFest. Now, This is no way to crap on WWF Superstars. That is an iconic game in its own right. So is this one, WrestleFest. So, but I do want to just show the differences, some of the differences with the comparisons of the two games and how WrestleFest took it to a whole nother level. But let's not downplay WWF Superstars, because that was definitely a pioneer to bring us what we got with WWF WrestleFest. So, but let's go ahead and take a look at the two games. Now, WWF Superstars was the first arcade wrestling game from Technos Japan, and it set the stage with easy to learn controls. You could pick from a small group of famous wrestlers and then take them through quick tag team matches, but the game had only one mode. You'd fight a few teams and then try to go on to win the championship. Now, that was fun, super fun, but compared to WrestleFest, it did seem a little limited. Now, WrestleFest came in like a steel chair to the face, surprising and powerful, and it gave the players two game modes, a tag team mode just like the original WWF Superstars, where you battled your way to a showdown with the Legion of Doom, and then the unforgettable Royal Rumble mode, where chaos ensued. In Royal Rumble mode, 6 wrestlers were in the ring at once, and you had to toss them out over the top to win. Or you can pin them or whatever else you had to do, submit them, but you had to defeat your opponents. It was chaotic, exciting, frustrating at times, and something totally new at the time of arcades. WrestleFest also gave players more moves. You could perform suplexes, slams, and even tag team finishers. Plus, the gameplay was smoother and more strategic than WWF Superstars. You had to manage your energy, work with your partner, and time your moves just right. So let's move on to the graphics and animation. When WWF Superstars hit the arcades in 1989, it looked great, and it still looks good to this day if you ask me. Wrestlers were large and colorful, and you could easily recognize iconic wrestlers like Hulk Hogan or Macho Man, and it was a big step up from older wrestling games, and animation felt smooth for the time. But in 1991, WrestleFest raised that bar. The wrestlers were bigger, the colors were brighter, and the movement was way more fluid. And wrestlers would enter the ring with their signature poses, kind of like they did in WWF Superstars, but that walk down the apron just took it to a whole nother level. And even the way they walked or got slammed looked more painful and more realistic. The crowd in the background cheered, signs waved. So WrestleFest didn't just improve the graphics, it brought the game up to a whole nother level. So let's talk about the roster. WWF Superstars gave fans 6 wrestlers to choose from: Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Honky Tonk Man, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Big Boss Man, and the Ultimate Warrior. Now, these were legends at the time, and having them in the game was awesome. The 6 choices meant you might come across the same matchups more often than you think. WrestleFest expanded the roster to 10 playable superstars, including Jake the Snake, Mr. Perfect, Sergeant Slaughter, and even Earthquake. And that's not all. The game also featured special boss characters like the Legion of Doom, who are going to at least take $2 from you when you get to them. But to be fair, WWF Superstars had Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase, so they both had their iconic boss fight at the end. But more characters, you can't deny that's a better deal as far as WrestleFest goes, with having 10 characters as opposed to 6. And also, the characters they did add were hot at the time. Only thing that sucks is I kind of wish they would have kept Macho Man at the time, but you know, it is what it is. So overall, there's no question WWF Superstars paved the way. It was exciting, colorful, and gave players a chance to step into the boots of their favorite WWF icons. So there's no question about it. WWF Superstars was the game that paved the way. It set up for WrestleFest to come later on. Still a fun, iconic game. I still have fun playing that one, but WrestleFest took it to a whole nother level. I mean, it just made the wrestlers were bigger, the action was faster, the game moved faster, and it had a larger roster of characters and new additions that were greatly welcomed in the wrestling game. And then on top of that, WrestleFest brought its own flair of improvements over WWF Superstar. So both great games, but obviously I have to go with WrestleFest here as the dominant, superior version of WWF wrestling arcade games in the 90s. No shade to Superstars, but WrestleFest was just clearly a vast improvement and new experience. So let's talk about the legacy that still rules the ring to this day as far as arcade 90s wrestling games go. So back in the early 90s, WWF WrestleFest was one of the most exciting wrestling games you could find, but only if you were lucky enough to visit an arcade. Unlike many other popular games at the time, WrestleFest never actually got a home console release when it was new, and that made it feel even more special. So if you wanted to body slam your friends or challenge the Legion of Doom, you had to hear the clink of quarters, the smell of popcorn, maybe some smelly kids standing next to you at your local arcade. It became a legend, not just because of how it played, but because of where you had to go to experience it. So as the years passed and home consoles became more powerful, many arcade classics got ported to systems like Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis, and they had a whole hit of wrestling games on their own. But WrestleFest never made that leap. Fans would often talk about it with a mix of excitement and sadness. Excited to remember how great it was, and sad that they couldn't play it at home. And that gave it even more popularity. it became a rare gem in the world of wrestling games. With its bright cartoon-style graphics, big-name wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, and that electric arcade energy stuck in fans' memories like a championship belt etched in gold. But then, in 2012, something surprising happened. THQ released a game called WWE WrestleFest for mobile phones. Now, it was meant to be a tribute to the original, with updated graphics and modern superstars like John Cena and CM Punk. And at first, fans were excited. Finally, they had a chance to play WrestleFest again. But the game just didn't feel the same. The controls were different, the animations felt off, and the heart of the original just wasn't captured. And it disappeared from the App Store not long after, leaving fans once again wanting to play some WrestleFest. So, nearly a decade later, in 2021, the legacy of WrestleFest came roaring back to life. An indie game studio released Retromania Wrestling, a spiritual sequel made by fans, for fans. It was clear from the start that this wasn't just another wrestling game, it was a love letter to WrestleFest. Everything about it screamed retro, from the vibrant pixel art to the quick and exciting gameplay. The game included real wrestlers from the National Wrestling Alliance, ECW legend Tommy Dreamer, and even the legendary Road Warriors Hawk and Animal, who were also featured in the original WrestleFest. The connection between past and present was strong, and fans of all ages could feel it. But WrestleFest isn't just kept alive by new games. All over the world, collectors are still searching for original arcade cabinets. Some fans spend thousands of dollars just to own one, so they can relive the magic in their own home. And other people, the more common folk, like myself, use emulators on computers or built arcade machines to play games digitally. Thanks to the internet though, new players are discovering the game every year, going back in time and learning what made it so fun and fast-paced. So WrestleFest has become more than just an average wrestling game, it's a piece of gaming history. It represents a time when arcade machines were kings of entertainment and wrestling was bigger than life. And even today, it still inspires developers to create wrestling games with that same exciting feel. So WrestleFest, what I think about it, I can't really put it into words. WrestleFest was one of those games that at the time, for a quarter, you could have the time of your life. It had variations of gameplay. You could play, like say, it captured the tag team mode. And then it also had the Royal Rumble mode where you can kind of get in and get chaotic and stuff like that. It offered up to 4 players at one time. Wrestling was still at an all-time high. And it was probably the last era of wrestling games made with the golden age wrestlers. That's what made it so important, because you would move on to new wrestling. It would move on to the 90s with the Shawn Michaels era. And then we introduced later on, we go into the Attitude era with Stone Cold, The Rock, and all those guys. But so this was, in my mind, one of the last true wrestling games to feature old school favorites like Ultimate Warrior, $1 Million Man, in their original incarnation. So the game holds a special place by a lot of people. I mean, by today's standards, there are a lot more technical wrestling games, like the 2K series, where it's over the top realistic. But for 1991, I feel like WrestleFest captured it perfectly. I mean, the controls were simple, the game was easy to play. The barrier entry level wasn't that high, so you can just put it in and you just mash the button and do some moves. So you didn't have to be super technical like you do with more modern wrestling games, where you got to do a whole, like landing a plane just to pull off a move. Back in the day, you just pushed a couple of buttons and your character came to life and did some stuff for you. So, and obviously with the games trying to get remakes back in 2012 and 2021, actually getting a remake, if you will, the game is still alive and well in pop culture. So if you've never played WWF WrestleFest, definitely check this one out. It's a arcade classic, known and loved by millions. But if you were around in 1991 and actually played the game during the WWF culture, and to see those real-time stars that were doing stuff on TV actually be in an arcade game, it was definitely a time to be alive in the 90s and play not only WrestleFest, but even 1989 shouts to Superstars. Thank God for that, so we could get WrestleFest. But that's gonna do it for my coverage with it. Let me know in the comments your experience with WWF WrestleFest. If you still play it, if you're one of those lucky few to actually have a WrestleFest arcade machine. I do not, but they're out there. I've seen some go for like $2,500, and if I had the money, I'd say definitely worth the purchase. I just don't got that kind of money to throw around an arcade machine. But you can still find these things every now and then. You can still find them every now and again in like a retro arcade. So yeah, WrestleFest is alive and well. So that's gonna do it for this video. And as always, guys, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you. I'm gonna catch you next video. Thanks for watching.